This video is sponsored by Squarespace. Stay tuned to save 10% or more on your purchase and learn more about building your website.
They can take your world.
Kingdom Hearts 2 concluded a narrative arc. Sora, Riku, and Kairi were together again on Destiny Islands. Once more, they had stopped Kingdom Hearts from being summoned, the world was seemingly at peace, and yet, the show must go on. So we get a game following Roxas before the events of Kingdom Hearts 2, a game following the adventures of a previous trio of Keyblade wielders leading into the first Kingdom Hearts, and a game trawling through the datascape. These games constitute a new arc of sorts. New characters are introduced, old characters are better fleshed out, and they're all placed in profoundly unfortunate situations with unresolved fates. Those fates, then, have to collide with our main characters eventually. So we have a situation where we need to get our main characters up to speed in order to set the stage for a grand finale. What, then, is the impetus to explore more Disney worlds? How will Sora and the gang learn about everything that's happened, and where they're ultimately headed? In the most raw way possible, of course. Sora and Riku are to undergo the Mark of Mastery. The Mark of Mastery was established as the exam by which you became a Keyblade Master, and was an excellent source of friction for the cast of Birth by Sleep. It served as a window into the more archaic culture of traditional Keyblade wielders. Sora and Riku are to learn a little bit about those ancient customs in preparation for the greater evil looming on the horizon. It's a rather genius premise which connects past to future. Admittedly, the Mark of Mastery in Birth by Sleep was just hitting some orbs for a few minutes. Here it's an entire journey through a new set of Disney worlds, but I always chalked it up to Yensid being a bit of a sadist. The root of the test is just to see whether or not a Keyblade wielder can prevent themselves from the temptations of the darkness. Plus, given a lot of what we learn in Kingdom Hearts 3, it seems like Yensid had more in mind here than just a Mark of Mastery. Having Riku serve as the second playable character to Sora is extremely fitting. This duo of protagonists, associated with light and dark respectively, are both a perfect fit for this test, and a brilliant contrast to Aqua and Terra. Sora and Riku have been best friends since they were little. They had no notion of becoming warriors. All they wanted to do was see the world. Aqua and Terra's test was a competition and source of strife, whereas Sora and Riku's test is a cooperative effort to save a collection of sleeping worlds. They have a friendship that, at this point, is unbreakable. What awaits the both of them is a veritable rabbit hole of familiar faces, twists, turns, insanity. Sora and Riku are exploring worlds that are dreaming, bearing witness to the events that transpired before their worlds fell to darkness. As such, each world was chosen with a level of intimacy in mind. Worlds like Prankster's Paradise, Country of the Musketeers, and Symphony of Sorcery contain characters like Mickey, Donald, Goofy, Jiminy Cricket, and Pinocchio in entirely different contexts that throw our characters for a bit of a loop. You start out in a place of comfort, Traverse Town, trickling down into worlds like La Cité des Cloches and The Grid. Fairly standard Disney adventures with a few callbacks to the past, branching into the more fantastical worlds like Symphony of Sorcery, and spiraling straight into the ensuing madness of the world that never was. Despite visiting the same worlds, Sora and Riku are playing out slightly different events with the same characters, leading to even more general confusion which can compound when switching between the two. Dream Drop Distance doesn't give you a simple level select, no. Instead, you play as one character for a set amount of time before dropping to the other. This can happen at basically any time, mid-world, during a boss fight, whatever. You're ping-ponging back and forth between two characters that are traversing the same worlds with the same Disney movie plot, reaching subtly different conclusions. Riku fights the Wargoyle on top of the cathedral, and Sora fights it at the bottom of the cathedral. Sora is much more concerned with Rinzler, aka Tron, when he visits the grid, ending more or less with the resolution of that encounter, whereas Riku is much more directly involved with Korra and these people. It's established fairly early on that Sora and Riku are on different sides of the same world, almost like alternate dimensions, but they don't really explain what that means or why it's happening. There are vague assumptions made about Sora and Riku helping each other out by bouncing bosses between sides. It doesn't stop it all from feeling disjointed, like nothing really fits together all that well. By the time you reach the world that never was, you're likely already unsure of where it's all going. Figures in black hoods have been showing up spouting cryptic dialogue. Sora and Riku can't see each other for some reason, and now we've hit the jackpot. See, since these are sleeping worlds, darkness can't enter them. They're just a set of events on loop forever, so the opposing force that exists within them are Dream Eaters. Nightmares, to be precise. This blows my mind in retrospect, but Riku has the Dream Eater logo on the back of his clothing the entire time, and yet I didn't once, for even a moment, make the connection. Turns out, Riku was a figment of Sora's dreams after he was put to sleep by the organization. Riku's a Dream Eater. All of a sudden, it just clicks into place. You took for granted that both of these journeys were happening at the same time. They weren't. In actuality, this entire exam was set up to fail, the organization luring Sora into their trap so they can make him into a vessel. But that isn't the insane part, no. This is just where it starts. See, you might have caught this line from Master Yen Sid at the beginning.
I will return you to the Destiny Islands just before they were swallowed by the darkness and plunged into sleep.
In order to set these boys on their quest, they needed to travel back in time on Destiny Islands. This is also why they look much younger than normal, and totally isn't a convenient way to cover up the idea that this was originally going to be a KH1 remake. Anyway, time travel exists now, I guess. That mysterious hooded dude in Kingdom Hearts 1, that was Ansem's disembodied form, if you remember. However, what we did not know was that a young version of Xehanort used him as a conduit to travel through time. This younger version of Xehanort has been recruiting various incarnations of himself throughout time, gathering together the new Organization 13, which brings us to...
But you, aren't you scared of just turning into someone else?
Me? I'm already half Xehanort.
In order for Master Xehanort's desire to come to fruition, for him to start the Keyblade War, he needs 7 pure lights to clash with 13 darknesses. The 7 lights have, or eventually will, more or less all work themselves out. But the 13 darknesses, well, his plan for that is to literally turn them all into himself. 13 versions of himself. There's really no excuse to not have a website these days. Even I have one. If you're interested, I've partnered with Squarespace for this video to offer you a chance to make one. Be it for music, art, merchandise, whatever, Squarespace can accommodate your needs, I assure you. I use my Squarespace website as a hub for newly released videos, updates on future videos, and more to come as I further develop its features. Link in the description if you're interested. You can make anything you want after watching their easily digestible tutorials and sleek intuitive building tools. Trust me, if I can make a website, you can too. There are step-by-step guides on what to do first. You can pick from dozens of potential pre-made styles, or scrap it all and start from scratch. They have hundreds of fonts to choose from. You can make things transparent, add color to the background, make image or video files your background. You can blur those images. You can add a store page if you're looking to sell music, art, or other merchandise. You can basically do anything to personalize your site for any use that you want it to have. Seriously, if you're a musician, artist, graphic designer, whatever, I guarantee you Squarespace will be helpful to you. So if you're looking to get started using Squarespace, you can begin your free trial today at squarespace.com/KingK using the code KingK to get 10% off your first purchase. That's squarespace.com/KingK using the code KingK to get 10% off your first purchase. There's really no excuse not to have a website these days, so get started now with the easiest, most accessible tool.
They can take your heart.
Nomura strikes me as a dude who likes to have fun. Modes where you can build your own gummy ship like you're playing with Legos, races and fruit volleyball in Disney Town, a rhythm game in Atlantica. Hell, Recoded is this amalgamation of different minigames, and Melody of Memory is just a rhythm game. Kingdom Hearts has never been shy to embrace new ideas, no matter how outlandish, and this time the inspiration is drawn from Pokemon. Your party members are Dream Eaters, cute animals you collect and play games with. Bats, elephants, fat cats, they're all feverishly colorful, like they came out of the mind of a 6-year-old. They're a wonderful addition to the Rogues Gallery, slotting right in with the dream motif. These would totally be fake Pokemon I thought up as a kid. A mix of cool, cute, and dumb. It just goes to show that Nomura's mind is constantly in overdrive. We can't just bring back Heartless, that'd be too boring. Let's make an entirely new set of critters that fit with our Sleeping Worlds theme and give players a new mechanic to play around with. It gives the game a distinct identity. It pairs well with the other mechanic, flow motion, which allows the player to bounce off of walls and dash through the air. This is yet another addition that feels like it was put in just for the hell of it, but completely alters how levels need to be designed. It's a bit of a return to KH1's more expansive, platformy design. Dream Drop Distance isn't really concerned with asking you to make tricky jumps. It's not really about platforming. It's more about the joy of movement, creating wide open areas you can jump around in. This section of Traverse Town with all the grind rails is a highlight for me. I often spend minutes on end jumping off the walls and grinding around. It's such a drastic jump up in mechanical freedom from the previous games, which were mostly a series of hallways where you did some combat. Unfortunately, where it feels like they completely push the envelope of radical, explosive plot revelations, its core gameplay features aren't pushed nearly far enough to stand out. Fusing new Dream Eaters and getting new abilities is fun, but feeding them cake and playing a few short minigames 18 times begins to wear out its welcome at the 11th hour. It doesn't help that the music which plays during these minigames is insufferable. Sora and Riku both need to keep on top of their unique party of Dream Eaters, meaning a significant portion of your playtime will likely be devoted to this side minigame. You also do not get to keep most of your abilities. Besides the permanent abilities like Second Chance and Once More, you will have access to the abilities of whichever Dream Eaters are active in your party, meaning some Dream Eaters feel a bit useless to sink any time into at all. You do get a few commands, some of which are pretty useful to unlock early, but to be honest, most of them you'll find by searching for all the chests anyway. Conceptually, I think this is a really fun idea, but my playthroughs always end the same way. I get about halfway through and just stop playing the minigames, stick with a core crew of Dream Eaters, and push on through to the end. Because if you want to make your Dream Eater management as efficient as possible, you're going to have to open up this menu multiple times in each world, search through the ability chart, and play these minigames over and over. And for what? A bunch of magic hastes that you won't even get to use unless you lug this early game Dream Eater around with you? When you're done chucking cakes and candy down their throats, cracks in the flow motion appear just as readily. Since you can only jump into walls and then again into the air, trying to get to higher places means awkwardly jamming yourself into a wall over and over. Level design is spacious, sure, but the rooms do often feel a little long in the tooth. There are large swaths of this game where you're running and jumping through giant rooms, fighting nightmares, and moving on. For as limited as previous games were, I can at least remember their layouts. There are many rooms in Dream Drop Distance that I cannot remember the specifics of. Visually interesting landmarks, a giant bridge, an amusement park, those are inherently going to be more fun than exploring the inside of Monstro again. Except bigger. If it was just platforming, fine, but given that you can attack out of it and transition into combat, flow motion's effects begin to bleed into the enemy encounters.
Cut you loose from all you know.
Dream Drop Distance turns the entire story on its head by introducing time travel. Now everyone can enter the story. Xemnas is back, Xigbar is back, Ansem is back. Anyone can be back, should Nomura desire it. It's almost terrifying how obvious it is that time travel was brought into the story specifically for this purpose. It is simply the method by which Nomura can place his pieces on the chessboard however he likes. Ansem is back to torment Riku, Xemnas is back to throw some more buildings at Sora, and all of them are back to wax poetic very loudly to anyone within range. Not only is it an effective way to weaponize our nostalgic memories of past villains to hype up Xehanort as the next big threat, it's also a completely genius way to place Xehanort in stark opposition to our protagonists. His goal is literally to make 13 versions of himself to enact the Keyblade War. He sends a younger version of himself throughout time to find vessels he can turn into himself. He isn't interested in forming alliances, he isn't looking for friends, he only trusts himself. He would sooner break all known laws of the universe, traveling through time and placing parts of himself into other people before he even considered simply trusting another human being. If that isn't the polar contrast to Sora, I just don't know what is. It raises a lot of questions about this dude's view of the world. What is it he saw in his youth that led him to take such extreme action? Why is it that he can't trust anyone but himself? Ericus was a flawed character, one who went to extreme lengths to prevent Xehanort from sparking the Keyblade War, even attempting to get rid of one of his pupils. Judging by the scars Xehanort inflicted on Ericus, his faith in the world had been shaken long before that point. Xehanort's dedication to this goal is immense. It's basically the entire drive of his character, and the reason why he manipulates everyone around him to get what he wants. Even dropping off Ventus, which Ericus initially took as an act of reform, he later learned was yet another part of Xehanort's grand machinations. He has a solid grasp on what motivates people, and where he doesn't give his trust to others, he is more than willing to take it and contort it to his own ends. His journey must have been the inverse of Sora's, where instead of getting caught up in the happy resolutions of various Disney worlds, he was instead wrapped up in a series of far more tragic tales, warping his view of the world. A lot of people really discredit Xehanort. They make him out to be this mustache-twirling villain, evil for the sake of evil, but I don't really think that's the point of his character. For as dumb and convoluted as Kingdom Hearts often is, there are very few times I can think of where a character does something that isn't at least well motivated. Terra trusts Xehanort due to his jealousy of Aqua and the broken trust with Ericus. Riku was motivated to join Maleficent because he thought Sora had left him behind as a friend. Axel didn't want to do anything to stop the incoming tragedy because he knew he couldn't stop what was ultimately coming and wanted to savor the time he had left with his best friends. Ansem is a certified mad scientist, his hunger for knowledge leading him to turn himself into a Heartless and unleash them upon the worlds. His final act was to harness Kingdom Hearts' darkness, which he was arrogant enough to believe was present when in fact Kingdom Hearts was light. His arrogance ended up becoming his greatest folly. Riku even reflects on this during the grid.
Look too hard for one thing, and you miss everything else. And then, the people around you get hurt in the process. Like Xehanort, his single-minded thirst for answers created Ansem. We all have a little of that curiosity in us. So if we're not careful, any one of us could create an Ansem.
Xemnas, then, Ansem's heartless outer shell, is left with nothing. He becomes the embodiment of nothingness. He seeks Kingdom Hearts so he can recreate the world in his bleak, emotionless image. And so it's his lack of emotion which leads him to desire power and manipulate others to suit his needs. A lot like his original self, Master Xehanort. It's two halves of a whole, Ansem representing his arrogant side and Xemnas representing his manipulative side, and they all desire Kingdom Hearts. I suppose it's tempting to call this contrived. I mean, to say that there was this big bad all along who technically had a hand in the creation of the two previous big bads, even going so far to have informed their worldview and motivations. It sounds like hammy writing, if I'm honest, but then who wrote the playbook here? Who decided that there was a correct way to tell a story?
But if it's your fate?
Where previous games did have a lot of combat hallways, at least what you did in those hallways was usually fun. In Kingdom Hearts 2, you could pull out fire for AoE, blizzard for a shotgun spread, or a drive form to spice things up. Dream Drop Distance brings back the command deck from Birth by Sleep, and it's just as limited as it was there. Since interesting combo and magic attacks had to be morphed into commands, your base combo is pretty weak. Unlike Birth by Sleep though, where you could change your command style and gain new combos, Dream Drop Distance's base set of combos are unchanged. You get your weak, repetitive base ground and air combo with blocks and reprisals. So again, like Birth by Sleep, you rely a lot on the commands you collect, and like that game, they're pretty hit or miss. Some of them are just kinda slow and bad, like Spark. Slow commands are usually a no-go, since getting hit at any point will cancel the command before it can even come out. You're sorta pushed into using the faster, stronger commands and spamming them. Commands like Shadow Breaker, Sonic Blade, Triple Plasma, and of course, Balloon. These moves either come out fast and strong like Shadow Breaker or Sonic Blade, meaning there's very little chance you'll get hit mid-attack, or are insanely powerful for almost no reason, like the balloon commands. Honestly, even a lot of the physical commands become really risky in the late game. Some Dream Eaters will stagger when you hit them, but the further into the game you get, the less likely this is to happen. There's no tangible revenge value system here. It actually feels like you have a revenge value system with how often you'll be getting hit mid-swing. It's easy then for flow motion to become a go-to strategy. Bouncing off the wall and smashing down to the ground, or dashing into a big enemy and throwing them into the pile is something you can spam with little to no consequence. In fact, you'll probably be doing at least a little more damage than some of your actual commands, depending on your level. Flow motion doesn't necessarily grant you invincibility, but it does allow you to get a lot of height to avoid everything happening on the ground, and when you perform a finishing move, it can't be interrupted. So while Birth by Sleep definitely has some useless commands, I find that Dream Drop Distance runs into this problem much more frequently, and it leads to some fairly formulaic combat encounters. It's a shame too, because there are some really cool commands that you'll simply never want to use under normal circumstances. I think you're starting to understand why people use Balloon so often. It's a fairly common spell, does a lot of damage, and continues even if you're interrupted. It even homes in on your target with its more powerful version. Birth by Sleep is certainly breakable with the right commands, but the urgency of that problem isn't nearly as pronounced. The fact that it's even possible to get through the game using Terra, who mostly relies on his physical commands, is already leaps and bounds better than this situation. And at least in that game, acquiring Second Chance and Once More was pretty simple, provided you did a quick Google search. Here, even after you've collected the necessary materials, you've got to spam these stupid minigames, and God forbid you haven't linked with them enough times. Everything just feels like a colossal grind in Dream Drop. You don't get a cool, thematically fitting Keyblade at the end like you do in the other games. Unless you want to be stuck watching Riku pull out this ridiculous Symphony of Sorcery Keyblade, you'll have to go perform one of many mundane tasks to get a decent-looking Keyblade. Every world has a set of challenge portals where you're tasked with defeating a group of enemies under certain conditions. There's a 20-second time limit, a restriction on your command deck, and a variety of stipulations like blocking attacks or using flow motion. These interruptions are also the only reliable way to obtain additional fusion material, yet another reason why I eventually stopped fusing new Dream Eaters. While these things are short, since you see so many of the same portals in every world, it eventually starts to feel like a distraction. Well, okay, you can get a cool Keyblade by A-ranking all of the dive segments. Never mind the fact that they're discount KH2 gummy ships, there's one for each world and character to complete. I'm usually a huge fan of ranking systems, but this one is incredibly shallow. Get through them as fast as you possibly can without getting hit. Given that some of these are straight up boss fights with some extremely unforgiving windows of attack, getting A ranks is needlessly frustrating. Dives are completely harmless otherwise, they serve more of a thematic function, not unlike the drop system. Taken on its own, it's not a super fun minigame. Alright, well then how about the Ultima Keyblade? Surely we can grind that one out, right? Nah. Not until you beat the game and unlock Julius. Let that sink in for a moment. This is a Kingdom Hearts game, a series that prides itself on its optional content, where you've pretty much always been able to obtain the ultimate, coolest, most epic of Keyblades before fighting the final boss. It's kind of the whole point. Here, you just can't. You honestly can't do much of anything besides fighting nightmares, and your mileage is going to vary on whether you find that fun. I, for one, grew quite sick of it by the third or fourth world, because they just don't do enough to distinguish them.
then every step forward.
It's easy to get caught up in the avalanche of plot revelations that show up at this game's climax, but even so, this doesn't strike me as particularly lazy writing. Time travel isn't as simple as the concept itself. In Kingdom Hearts, you can time travel by sending your heart into a past or future version of yourself at any point in time. When you return to your original body, you lose all memory of your experience, though it will still be etched into your heart, so it might subconsciously affect your decision-making. You also cannot alter the timeline. Things will happen the way they are fated to happen, for now, anyway. Like, this is an ultra-specific way to codify time travel into your world's mythos. They could have just said that you travel through time like people with darkness powers travel through the shadow portals, and that would be that. It is a plot device, but it's one that's had a lot of care put into it. Time travel is such an out-there concept in most stories, but for this one, it's really not all that special on the face of it. In this universe, where you can get in a spaceship, travel to a world plucked out of a Disney movie, remove your heart from your body as if it was your soul, morphing into a creature of the night, leaving behind an emotionless outer shell, the idea that you can travel through time by sending your heart to another version of yourself is just another insane facet of this world. I don't understand the idea that it completely breaks some deliberately crafted mythos. This shit was always fucking bananas. The second game in this franchise is one where Sora and the gang happen across a mysterious castle, which begins stealing Sora's memories, replacing them with false ones. It's a universe predicated on fairy tales, where magic and whimsy are par for the course. There are worlds with talking genies in a lamp, a man cursed with a beastly form, a mermaid who wants to venture out from under the sea. I guess what I'm saying is that I'm not personally surprised the story headed in this direction, and it was bound to happen sooner or later. People tend to act like the first Kingdom Hearts was this completely pure crossover between Square Enix and Disney, as if that isn't a completely off-the-walls crossover to begin with. In the same series where an anime cult leader expresses his desire to turn the world into nothingness, you're fighting Pete in the Timeless River, which actually, by the way, was just a damn door in Disney Castle that transported everyone to the past. There is no other explanation for what's happening here. Nomura has been on this bullshit since day one. It really is hard to stay mad at stuff like this when the game uses returning characters so damn well. Ansem and Riku have some excellent scenes together, furthering Riku's journey of redemption. At the end of Dream Drop Distance, he completely rids himself of Ansem's hold and saves Sora from becoming Xehanort's final vessel. Now, this could have just been another inner struggle. Maybe pieces of Ansem survived in Riku, and now he has to fight off the mind bugs.
Mickey! It's Riku! They put bugs in him!
What?
Instead, they brought him into the future so he could taunt Riku for real. When they fight at the end, he really is fighting against Ansem in that moment, just as Sora is fighting against Xemnas, and in a way, embodying the will of Roxas and Xion who are inside of him. Having Sora fall to darkness after learning about all of the tragic souls connected to him, the weight he'll have to carry into the future, was something I flat out did not expect. I thought both of these boys would emerge masters, and yet the only one who did was Riku, the one who doubted himself the most. It's reflected really well by each character's Disney achievements. Sora usually doesn't accomplish very much, and Riku ends up picking up Sora's slack. One of the most obvious examples for me was the progression of the grid. Sora spends his time there wandering around pretty confused until he learns about Tron and goes on a desperate hunt to restore his memories. It ends with Rinsler perhaps regaining a bit of his memory as Tron, but not before being snatched away. Sora then kinda just leaves. Riku, on the other hand, is here to help all the way. He befriends Sam and is instantly prepared to help them escape the grid. All I'm saying is that I think there's a reason Riku gets to follow the movie plot and save the day, while Sora kinda just flounders around confused while the organization taunts him. Sora really is nothing without his friends. Even in the Disney worlds where he triumphs over evil, he needs help from countless other people just to get there. He needs the help of all the Musketeers and Riku to fight off Pete. He needs the second sound idea from Riku to go fight Spelican. And of course, he needs Riku to come to rescue him after the organization mindfucks him. It's not an altogether bad trait, but it's one that doesn't always lead to the most desirable outcomes. In this case, Sora's willingness to fight for his friends ran counter to his desire to improve himself and become a master. So it's really no wonder that Riku, one of the most self-conscious characters in this universe, would end up conquering his darkness and coming out of it all a Keyblade Master. Regardless of the outcome, Sora congratulates Riku.
Way to go, Riku!
Yeah?
I knew you were gonna pass with flying colors. This is just so awesome.
Gee, Sora, you're kinda acting like it's you that passed.
Look, he's my favorite character for a reason. No matter what happens, he radiates positivity everywhere he goes. It's overwhelming, and he always makes me smile.
Hey!
Riku! You're safe! Riku!
Wait, haven't we got this backwards? And why are you having a tea party?
You're safe, Riku!
Oh, never mind.
It's really hard for me to not just nod my head and let Nomura sweep me off my feet for this one. He's still hitting those emotional highs, giving Riku a phenomenal bookend to his long journey battling against the darkness, and leaving Sora of all people stripped of his power. It might as well be Riku's game, which Sora simply makes a cameo appearance in. It's this journey down the proverbial rabbit hole that he's needed since coming to terms with who he is at the end of Kingdom Hearts 2.
Will always be a step closer to home.
I was really looking forward to the final boss gauntlet because I remember really liking it. Every KH game has a badass endgame where all the best music, boss fights, and story moments are. This is like half of the reason I love Birth by Sleep despite its laundry list of issues, and I was about ready to do the same for Dream Drop Distance. And it's weird. Beating them again recently, I just felt a bit hollow, which is strange because these fights are dope as hell. Riku fighting Ansem, Sora fighting Xemnas, and of course, Riku up against young Xehanort's time travel shenanigans. I mean, who's gonna argue with those Yoko Shimomura bangers? Yet, fighting them all again made me realize just how unsatisfying it is to play this game. Since you rely so heavily on your boring, broken commands, these fights don't feel like duels. Terra versus Xehanort? That's a fucking duel. Ventus versus Vanitas? That's a fucking duel. Aqua versus Terranort? You get the idea. You exchange blows back and forth, even if the bosses feel a little more powerful than they should be. Here, you're essentially just spamming commands, tanking hits, and healing up. Young Xehanort is the worst about this, since pretty much nothing will stagger him. The fight used to be one of my favorites, it's really unique, but it is hard for me to rise past the frustration of him just ignoring literally everything I throw at him. It's not hard, Balloon made sure of that, it's just really awkward. Really awkward. Getting to the credits again made me question if I even like it anymore. I'll die on the hill that this story is incredibly entertaining and even endearing, but is it worth slogging through the game part? Birth by Sleep had a lot of problems, but it was at least fun where it mattered most. Fighting Terranort as the Lingering Will made me feel that same wave of indescribable emotion I felt fighting Ansem in KH1 or Roxas in KH2. Dream Drop Distance just doesn't do that for me anymore. Who can really say what's changed? It's clear to me that this was a game of setups, introducing a mountain of plot devices that Nomura could use to set the stage for the final battle. It's in this weird twilight zone between 2 and 3, and with each passing day, its presence in my mind's eye becomes that of a bridge. And I guess it's fitting that this was the hardest Kingdom Hearts video to write thus far. We're so close to talking about Kingdom Hearts 3, a video that I've been thinking about for 3 years. Completing this video means that I'll finally be able to lay the groundwork for that project, meaning this video was simply a formality. I tried to make it fun, I tried to make it interesting, but in the end, this isn't the video you care about, is it?
You might be surprised. Oh, I hope so.
I've been
having these weird thoughts lately.
like, is any of this for real or not? None of this makes sense to me.